Dr. Woodruff.
Hello. Minister, the Lake Malbena development appeal, which is in train at the moment with the Rampat, the Attorney General sought advice from the Solicitor General about whether LUPA applies to development applications within reserves. Minister, why is your government trying to silence the voice of councils to have a legitimate say in what happens in their local area?
Well, I think there's a legitimate question here that the Attorney's seeking to have answered. Obviously through the, and I can speak only from my background as the Planning Minister as this was developed. I remember my early discussions with the TPC back in 2014 whereby it was broadly agreed with the Launceston Interim Planning Scheme that parks would be responsible for what went on in parks and councils were responsible for the activities outside of parks. And the Launceston Interim Planning Scheme was the first of the interim planning schemes that was established on that basis. Now, in terms of the activities within parks, that's determined, as you'd well be aware, through a reserve activity assessment process, and there are a number of different levels, I think up to 4 in terms of the activities there, and also the management plans that are put in place. And so, in many cases, the consideration of matters of what can occur in a park has already taken place. In terms of council and its position in assessing the development application, the question has been asked as to whether or not it actually had jurisdiction, is my understanding of it. I was asked this morning whether or not I'd initiated that. I didn't. That was a question that was taken forward by the Attorney to seek clarity. But that process will take its...
The Premier's been, on record and said so many times that the Lake Malbena development, which is so controversial being in the World Heritage Area of a private development, is all about the due process, and the due process will go through. Well, the due process went through and the Central Highlands Council made a very difficult decision, which they lamented the difficulty of that decision actually and the lack of support that they had around it. But they nonetheless made a considered and courageous decision to reject the development. Now, at this point, it seems that with the encouragement of the Premier, the developers went to appeal, and now it seems as though the government's weighing in behind the developer to give them more support. Why is it now, after you've been in government for 5.5 years, that you've decided to ask this question of the Solicitor General?
Again, it's a matter of clarifying the law.
But why now? Isn't it because this is a development which your government has committed to proceed with, regardless of whether the due process is followed or not?
Well, in terms of, I think there's a question of law here to be answered, and that is, where does jurisdiction lie? Is that with LUPA or is it through the reserve activity assessment process within parks? Now, I think it's important that question is answered, and that's what is occurring.
Have you sought advice from the Solicitor General about the implications for LUPA approvals of prior developments that have taken place, should this Rampat appeal be found to be the case?
Look, I haven't, no.
And why not? Are you concerned about the potential for, this is opening a huge can of worms. There's never been an indication that there's a question of law, as you put it. Before, developments have been proceeding like this in Tasmania for many, many decades, but now that the politics don't suit your government for having a pet project not furthered, I mean, why are you not concerned about the implications for other local councils and the developments?
Well, again, look, that is a question more appropriately put to the Planning Minister, which I'm not.
Well, I'm putting it to you as the local government minister because you're responsible for local government
areas. What I've said is that there is a process underway, and that question is been asked, and it'll be answered.
Will you seek advice from the Solicitor General about the implications for other developments?
Look, again, who I seek advice from are matters for me to concern myself with.
Well, it's actually a
but-
matter for Tasmanians who are
well,
concerned
in terms
about
of,
the role of councils and having a legitimate say, having a voice over what happens
But
in
again,
their area.
in terms of planning matters, you should appropriately put that question to the planning minister.
Well, I'm talking to the local government minister about a local
And
government matter.
the local government minister
The
is
local
suggesting-
government minister
is
will
suggesting
not
it's-
seek
Order.
is
information
suggesting-
about this.
is suggesting
Okay.
you should put that question to the
All right.
planning
Woodruff.
I'll see that.